let's start our webinar.
Sure.
Yeah. So, first of all, very good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. So, I promise that it is going to be a very interactive one. So, yeah. So, this is our webinar from Billion Career HR Next series, which is Become a Top Workplace in 2023, Strategies to Improve Employee Learning and Development. This is our sixth webinar from this series. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Neha Aarti. I'm your host for today, and I work as a marketing manager in Billion Careers. We were supposed to have one of my colleagues, Divya Kapoor, also to join today, but because of this unpredictable weather, she's not well today. So yeah, I will be taking this webinar ahead. Uh, so we will keep this webinar interactive and informative for all of you guys. So feel free to put your questions or queries in the chat box or Q&A box. We will be happy to take them at the end of the webinar. We have kept a dedicated time for that. The key speaker of today's webinar is Rohan Nabar, Vice President, Group Head Talent and Development and Learning at Questcom. Rohan has 2 decades of global experience in learning and organizational development, working across India, Singapore, and Germany. He has worked with MEHR, L&T Infotech, Thomas International, Carl Zeiss, Swiggy, and now heads talent and learning at Quest Group. Rohan is a lifelong student of human behavior and is certified on DISC profiling, emotional intelligence, Enneagram, Jungian type. He is a certified happiness coach and educator, a certified innovation and design thinking coach. Having led L&D functions across multiple industries and organizations across geography, he would share his insights with us on how to become a top workplace in 2023. So yeah, so without further ado, let's hear from our key speaker, Rohan Nabar. So yeah, over to you, Rohan.
Sure. Thank you so much, Neha. I think the profuse introduction basically means that the sales pitch is very high, which means the execution needs to be right up there. You'd rather sometimes under promise and over deliver. But thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. On a Tuesday evening on this particular webinar. What we will do, and you will see as we go along. There is interactivity right at the beginning through conversations and right at the end as well. So we'd like to hear from you as we go along as well. And I'd like to share some of my observations over the years of having worked across organizations within the learning space. Of course, the last 2 or 3 years have been very different, for a whole lot of us. And what do we then take back as per all of these changes, evolutions that have happened? That would be my attempt, through today. And right at the end, as Neha said, we will obviously take questions that you would have. As the conversation goes on, if you think there is a question you want to put down, feel free to put it down on the Q&A or on the chat box, so that as we get towards the end, we probably have a lineup of questions that you would have, and then we look at answering all of those. So I'll keep it as brief as I can, as direct as I can. And looking forward to fielding any questions that you would have as we get towards the end. So I'll move ahead from here. Just a quick check, as it does in the virtual world. You're able to see my screen, you're able to see me, and you're able to hear me as well, right? So a quick thumbs up would let me know that it's all okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Super. Thank you. Fantastic. So for those of us who are comfortable going into a web window, you're able to press in menti.com and then put in the code 1474540. Or if you have a handphone handy, just open the camera and scan the QR code that you see here. And I want to start this particular conversation with a short poll, right? So I'm going to keep this on for the next 15 to 20 seconds, either of the 2 ways that you want to log into the poll, and there is a question that you are asked. I want you to respond to that question, and that's from where we will start the conversation. Yeah. So in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to just pull this screen down, and I'm going to put up a screen where you will have your responses populating. Allow me a quick second to open up my screen. Are all of you able to log in, and are you able to put in your responses? I'm just quickly sharing my screen because I see responses coming in. So you're able to see what I'm able to see as well. Allow me a quick second. Let me know if my screen is visible to you. Okay, we have folks from the business here. It's fantastic to see that. We have people from L&D. Fantastic. There's 3 business folks in here. I'm thrilled to look at a webinar which is based on learning and development. And the first 2 responses coming in from individuals who are actually from a business team. We'll give it another minute for those of us who may have a bit of a challenge entering into, the scanning code or even the menti.com and the code that comes in. In case if you haven't scanned it, you're able to see it's 14745450. Great. We have 1 person from L&D Consulting. We've got 5 people from business teams. It's fantastic to see that. "20 more seconds. We've got 20 plus folks and we've got only 7 responses. Wow. Okay, this is quite a revolution if you ask me. Great. We have folks from support team as well. Wonderful. This is interesting, right? The last couple of seconds, and I'm going to pull that off. So we've got a huge chunk of today's attendees from business teams. We've of course got people from L&D Consulting as well. And there you go, you've got a debut from the corporate L&D. So somebody who is running the learning function within an organization, somebody who is supporting learning and development initiatives from the outside, right, to an organization. And of course, you've got 8 people who are in roles where they're running a business, in fact, 10 now, who basically could look at learning from various angles, right? Can my team members be on the field, or should they be in a learning classroom, or should they be in a learning course online? We've got 2 people from support as well. So we're going to start as we get into the next part of this particular webinar to look at all the 4 lenses that you've got here, right? So and I'm so happy to see that we have a whole lot of people from the business side. What that essentially means is if you were to look at learning from the perspective or the lens of a business person, how is that important? And why I bring this up as we start, and allow me a moment to bring up my screen as well. If you're all able to see my screen now, I'm just going to quickly move it ahead. Why I wanted to bring this up as a conversation as well was, like I said, business teams usually would say, I'd rather have my team members on the field selling, executing, servicing, etc., versus somebody in the classroom. Those were the conversations perhaps 15, 20 years ago when I started my career. And when you look at conversations now, they are to say, well, I want my people in the classroom, because when they go onto the field, when they go on to taking on the course, depending on whichever industry they are from, whether they go into the store when they're selling some of the products that they would, are they equipped for it, right? And essentially, irrespective of where you're coming from, I want to start with giving you a sort of a perspective, right? 79% of CEOs feel that there's a lack of essential skills, and that's threatening the way business would grow. This is out of a PricewaterhouseCoopers survey. And if you were to look at the expectations, the core expectations that business has had, and I'm so glad that we have a major number of business folks in this particular webinar, and what have been the expectations that the business have had out of L&D over the years, it's essentially been to learn the skills that an individual does on their current job. You could have somebody who is a salesperson, let's say, in a mobile phone store, right? If somebody joins in, how is he or she able to actually carry out their day-to-day job? Do they know what the product is all about? Do they know how to interact with the customer? Do they know, when is it that here's a signal that the person wants to buy, and then I get them then into the cash counter. I clarify whatever their questions are. Those would, let's say, be some of the first skills that a business would want L&D to focus on. You'll probably realize over a period of time that there is a festive season, right? And a whole lot of people coming into a store, a whole lot of people going into e-commerce websites, and a whole lot of them making purchases, that they would want. Now, visualize this perspective. You have a whole lot of customers in a store, but somehow the billing happens slowly, right? And somebody's queuing up there as a customer, doesn't want to wait. They say, I don't want to come into your store. I'll probably go on to another. I don't want to get into your website because it takes a whole lot to go through the payment gateway and for me to make my purchase. So how are we able to look at somebody doing their job, in a quicker way, in a way where the experience for the customer is better, and so increasing productivity? So one is to get to know what my job is right at the beginning. The second is the moment I've got onto the job, do I know how to do my job well and be more productive, and hence probably serve more customers. And the third expectation over the years essentially has been, can I ensure that an individual who starts their career, let's say, as it's described as feet on street, somebody who is interacting with the customer at the front end, over a period of time, grows, does better, learns a lot, gets into roles that are supervisory in nature. So I have a whole lot of customer service, people in the store, and here I have somebody, who's been there, done that, who works well, and then is able to supervise. I mean, I can tell you with some of the experience that we've got within the organization as well, people who start as security guards to begin with, right? And then over a period of time, spend a while and get to a point where they're supervising a site. So there are a whole lot of guards that they're probably supervising. So, are we then helping individuals who've been at a job grow from there on? And, not only mean when the company grows that they grow with the company, but they are also engaged and stay long with the company. So these have broadly been the expectations that business has had over the years. And this is probably what we are seeing maybe, pre-COVID, if you will, right? But of course, what in parallel has happened, to multiple industries, to multiple organizations for the last some time, a whole lot of us who are here today may have experienced, work from home, working hybrid, some of us probably have experienced, medical challenges, work challenges. And so there are a whole lot of changes, that have come about. Now, COVID perhaps in a whole lot of surveys done over the last 2 or 3 years said was the largest determinant of digital transformation, right? It is to say that, well, you can have a CTO, you can have a customer, but eventually COVID ended up expediting the transformation that organizations have undergone. So let's look at what are some of the over the years impact that industries have had in terms of the way they've transformed. Look at a food delivery service, for example. So you would have your from an India context perspective, look at a Swiggy, look at a Zomato. They would deliver food to you perhaps in 45 minutes to an hour, right? And now individuals want all of that, perhaps, and more variety, and customers want it perhaps quicker, and they want it cheaper, for example, right? So the customer expectations are going higher and higher. And so if you probably had somebody who was a customer service agent in the past, they may have dealt with fewer people. Maybe now they need to deal with more people, right? Earlier, a customer service agent probably had to deal with perhaps lesser complicated issues. Now there's a lot more complication in there. You have probably a delivery boy in that sense who had to make lesser deliveries. Now they got to make a lot more deliveries. So there has been exponential increase in customer expectations. There's of course a whole lot of impact that technology has had on the way industries have transformed. So perhaps in the past you had a whole lot of inputs coming in that automation and machines will basically reduce jobs. One of the surveys of World Economic Forum had said that by the year 2025, we're going to have about 85 million job losses across the globe, which essentially means somebody who had a job may not have a job. But immediately at the back of that, because of the use of automation, data, machine, etc., there are 95 million more jobs that are coming. Right now, visualize this. 10 years ago in the insurance industry, if you were actually to buy an insurance policy, you probably had to, go to a branch, you had to have an agent coming in and some, physical exchanges that were happening. But today, for example, via digital platforms, there are insurance aggregators, right? And you go and search for a particular policy that you want. Let's say go to Policy Bazaar and you have options and you can click, click, click and finish the purchase. KYC would probably happen over phone. So a salesperson perhaps in the past was used to doing this face to face, but today, because of digitization, you may probably need to understand that there's an impact not just on doing your job well, knowing how to do your job, or even learn or grow for your next job, but literally on that current job, they need to keep themselves on the toes and keep learning, and keep getting better at what they do. What has also happened, our business models have really changed over the years. Now, perhaps for those of us, who remember, and I'm taking the liberty to switch languages here, but, cabs, perhaps, a couple of decades ago, you had your Kali Pili, as they are called, right? The cabs that you, hail from the road. Over probably a decade or so ago, you had your mega cabs and your Merus, etc., in your metros that would run. So the mega cabs or the Merus were actually owned by the companies, and you had drivers who were on the payrolls, right? But business models are really changing in a manner where, let's say today, you have lakhs of Ubers and Olas running on the road. They are not owned by Uber or Ola, and the drivers are not on their payrolls in that sense. So business models changing would mean that people who had a certain set of skills in the past may not again be able to use those. And so we need to be on our feet to ensure what are the different things that somebody needs to learn, and be on their feet and to sort of do things better. And if you actually were to even look at organizations expanding beyond industries, a more popular example perhaps in the white collar space, if you will, essentially is looking at Apple, for example, and looking at going beyond industry, starting with computers, and then using subscription mode, and then into hardware of handphones, etc. But similarly, closer home, if you were to look at Wipro, for example, right? It started off as an organization which was into vegetable oil and old economy organization, but then got into electronics, electricals, bulbs, etc. And of course, you have your information technology now, and the same with the Tatas, for example, right? Going across industry. So essentially, if you were to look at all of these changes that are coming about over the years, one must look at an individual cannot necessarily learn what they did in school and college and then think that they're going to be able to have a long and successful career based on that. There has been intense research conducted by multiple organizations around. One such research is that's conducted by LinkedIn, which essentially says that every 4 to 5 years, the skills that one needs to use is changing over a period of time. In fact, that would get lesser and lesser into the number of years. So if I have I have graduated about 2 decades ago, right? I cannot rest on what I have learned then to be successful today. I need to learn newer and newer skills. They need not be again technology. They could be beyond technology. They could be as far as business models are concerned. They could be as far as soft or behavioral skills as far as interacting with my customers are concerned. And so while you looked at the expectations that the industry had over L&D over the years, because industries themselves have changed, right? The expectations from L&D has changed over the years as well. And now, as I look into the things that have changed, and when I started my first job within the learning and development space, things were not as dynamic, and somebody would give a particular need, and they could probably wait perhaps for a month for something to be designed and come back. Today, for example, if a business comes with a need to the L&D team, then they're expecting that some part of the solution to be existing already, and then quickly customize, and that's on the ground. Now, what that essentially means is that it's not as smooth and simple to run learning probably as it was perhaps 2 or 3 decades ago. And so what I'd like to bring to your notice essentially is that there are, running a successful learning function and having an organization run the way it should. Until 2022 is what I've been talking about, but I guess going ahead in 23, we must estimate what would be potential challenges that we may face from a learning standpoint. What could be, friction or barriers that we could face as far as, learning is concerned. And so we can focus probably on some of those from a strategic standpoint, and then be able to work on it to ensure that we make our organization the top organization. The first essentially, is commonly viewed as language. And mind you, language here does not necessarily mean, a certain global language or a local language, but essentially also, if you, to give you an example, one of the businesses that we run essentially is, technology troubleshooting, right? And somebody who needs to learn that particular piece needs to learn technology jargon, needs to understand technical language. And hence, if there is a common man language course, that would be done, they would probably not be able to solve some of the problems that they are in waiting for them. You could probably look at, one of your, how shall I say, counter salesperson in a store, largely because we're talking about blue and gray collar workers. If you are in a metro city, then you may want to look at a certain kind of language proficiency that the person would need to have. And then the moment you are running to tier 2 and tier 3, cities, for example, you may need the person to have proficiency, perhaps across different languages, perhaps Hindi, perhaps some of the regional languages. So is your learning offering within the organization, catering to people from across, especially again, as we look at the scale that blue and gray collar, workforces are, you need to be able to cater to across the spectrum. If it is to one particular, sphere, then you may end up actually missing on the other. So do you have a spread in terms of, like I said, technical language as well as different languages in polish? The second very important thing is that you need to be very mindful. In any other industry, you probably have pretty much every employee at a desk, and every employee may probably have a laptop or a desktop to access this. But talk about the blue and the gray collar workspace. Not every individual, in fact, perhaps majority of them may not have a system. They may not have a laptop, but they may not have a desktop. And so, how do you make content accessible to them? They are probably in a store and they are actually engaging with customer conversations. Perhaps the penetration of handphone across the country is very strong. So is the learning content that you're offering to them accessible to them over a handphone? And if not, then how are you going to be able to ensure that the lowest common denominator, the person at the last mile, the person in tier 2 and tier 3 city, is actually able to access the content? You could probably design absolutely brilliant, beautiful content, but if it's not accessible to the last person in there, it's going to be just on the shelf and not going to be consumed, right? And the third friction, and I've observed this a whole lot over my 2 decades of learning, working across learning, is that senior management and supervisors essentially think that I'd rather have my team members on the field. I'd rather have them do what they do from a work standpoint, deliver, versus necessarily them being in a learning classroom, and for them actually to be able to build on skills. Now, 2 or 3 broad things here to break down. One is in terms of whether there is offering of a whole lot of content that the organization has? That's the first question to ask. If you don't have a whole lot of learning offerings, then individuals obviously don't come in and access that. The second question essentially is to ask, when these are, there's a whole lot of learning offerings that one has, are they relevant to the people that are in there, right? So you can have a whole lot of content there, but let's say if it's not necessarily, accessible to people and it's not relevant to them, they're not going to come and use it. And the third important question essentially is, how are the managers and leaders in that particular organization leading from the front? Are they learning themselves? Are they role modeling the fact that, well, I have a whole lot of work, I am very busy, but I'm learning, right? And still, as a result of which, every person in the organization needs to spend a certain amount of time to ensure that they learn. And in fact, if individuals actually learn, is there acknowledgement of that coming in, right? So let's say something like, in a particular team, this person has spent the maximum amount of time learning. Do you, call that out? Do you acknowledge this? Are you talking about in a particular region across the organization? Somebody has probably spent a whole lot of time and effort on learning. So that's where shaping the culture comes up. And also at the end of the day, do you then say, yes, you have work to do, but at the same time, pull out time to actually be able to learn during the time that you work. So you're not expecting people to come in and learn outside of, working hours. You're not expecting people to actually come in and actually learn perhaps over weekends. So it's important that those, roadblocks don't come into individuals, that, across languages, across access to content, as well as, the organizational culture, all of these are frictions that we as learning professionals from a consulting, from a corporate L&D, or even for that matter, from a business standpoint. If the conversation that the business team has with the L&D team is to say that, here is a business problem I have, how can I solve that through learning, right? And then actually you're able to focus on what needs to be done. Talk about, let's say, in the pandemic, overnight, you had a whole lot of delivery personnel, leave their locations of work and go into their hometowns, for example, right? And suddenly, overnight, you had to onboard people who had to come in and make those deliveries. You have your Flipkarts of the world, you have your Swiggies of the world, and essentially you had, customers ordering more and more, and to fulfill, do you actually have people in there, right? So only and only if you have observed this friction is reduced, will you see a whole lot of learning happening. Now, if you were to look at the challenges or the drawbacks or the pain points, it's of course important for you to also look at what could be done to work around this, right? And so what I wanted to share with you as well is, what can organizations focus on from a learning standpoint to be able to make things better as far as your organizations are concerned, and what could you focus on in the year to come by? I mean, I've obviously spoken of the challenges and the points which will kind of hold you back. I want to also focus some time, effort, and energy on what you could do to solve or focus on some of these. I'm very mindful here that I want you to look at this not just as a here and now problem, but I want you to be able to look at it from the perspective of a slightly more mid and longer term perspective as well. And so what's very important for you to look at is, and again, bringing some amount of data here, basis a World Economic Forum report, 50% of all employees would need, this is a survey done in the year 2020, 50% of all employees by 2025 will need reskilling, right? What that means is 1 out of 2 people in your organization basically will need to pick up things that they probably have not in the past, right? So they need to learn newer things. Now, what that essentially means is you created some content 3 years ago, right? And that's not relevant anymore. You're talking about market changes coming about, you're talking about technology changes coming about, you're talking about government regulations changing, you're talking about Uber drivers, for example, right? And they would have learned something 3 years ago, but regulations have changed. And so you need to ensure that the content that you create for them needs to be constantly updated. It can't be done and dusted at one point. Now, whichever industry that you belong to, whichever organization you belong to, take this as something that you need to, carry forward for your employees. Um, a whole lot of learning years ago used to be in terms of hours. And let me tell you this, observations and surveys through what are called as massive open online courses, the e-learning courses that are available on your portals like your Coursera's and edX have a 2% completion rate, right? Now you can't expect some of your blue collar and gray collar folks who are on the ground, with the customer day to day delivering to actually be able to sit there and learn over hours. So all the learning that you've got for them needs to be bite sized. You have, a 2 minute, 3 minute video, you have a 4 or 5 minute video at max, and a combination of these videos perhaps for people to consume. Now, a video as well as them making a reflection as a combination so that the individual is engaged. So bite size does not necessarily only mean that they are short in their videos, but they are videos sort of connected with the way they consume. So are they reflecting on something? Are they noting some things down? How can we focus on that, for the future? By the way, a whole lot of this is already happening across organizations. But what I want to sort of call out is that, what started today will have to be made better and better in times to come. If in your organizations you have not looked at this at the moment, then I think you're already a step back. So you need to be able to reflect and look at what we're speaking about for present and for future. And the third and very important thing is anywhere, anytime, and any device, avatar as it's called. It should not necessarily be that an individual, I think we spoke about this a few minutes ago, to say that your employees need not have, let's say, a laptop or a desktop, but they could be able to access it over any device. They need not have a device provided by the organization and a login through that particular portal, but could they use it on any handphone and on any network? Do they have access to this across day and night? Classical examples through my experience I have seen is bank employees, right? They are at their desk, they are interacting with customers, on their working hours. But if learning is not available to them at any point, I mean, they could, between two customers, they can do some of their learning. As they start their lunch hour, they can quickly do a piece and go ahead. Some of them may be traveling from, home to the branch. They could do that. So anytime access to, learning is extremely important. So those are the few things that I want you to think about as far as the present and future of learning is concerned. And for that to be done, it's very important for some fundamentals for us to put in place. I remember this as a conversation in one of my first assignments into leading, L&D teams. We basically had business strategy, right? In an organization, you may probably have an HR strategy, but my question was, do we have a learning strategy, right? So just to give you a parallel, when you look at a business strategy, you usually talk about there's a certain number or revenue that you have for the year. You're probably focusing on certain products to be done. You're focusing on certain kind of target groups from a customer standpoint, right? So you always look at a mid and long-term view from a business standpoint. But are you looking mid-term and long-term from a learning standpoint? Are you talking about these are the skills we need to focus on over the next 2 or 3 quarters? Are you talking about these are the modes of delivery that we need to look at in the next some time? Are we going to do some train the trainers so that my trainers can go in and deliver? I can talk about this even with our experience, at Quest, for example. You have trainers who are literally on the ground, multiple languages, multiple trainings, for security guards, for housekeeping folks across. So you need to have a certain, view of medium and long term. Of course, here and now, we obviously will create and deliver training as well. So that's important to do. That also gives you a view of what's coming next. That gives you a view of, what are you spending, what is the outcome of learning, etc. The second important fundamental that we need to keep in mind is that there needs to be a culture of learning and growth mindset. We spoke about a fact that where managers would say, no, don't, go into a training program, rather be in your job, deal with more customers, service more mobile phones, or, sell more, different products. So unless there is a culture of learning where supervisors and managers are encouraging their team members to learn, And by the way, the reason why we have growth mindset there is sometimes learning is looked at as sessions being done. How many sessions have I attended? But learning is not always about attending sessions. I've handled a difficult customer. I've handled an irate customer, somebody who's angry, somebody who's not necessarily very happy with the way I had serviced them, and I get to learn from them. How do I handle them? How do I ensure that they go back happy? Now, growth mindset is learning through every interaction that you have with your customers. Let's say, I probably work at the airport, and at the airport, for example, there are certain things that happen, new. They may not have happened in the past. Am I then ready to learn from some of them, and I'm able to kind of build from there? So having that, the culture of learning and the growth mindset in every individual is extremely important. And perhaps the third, and in my mind, one of the most important fundamental is that a lot of times we think of learning as video is being consumed, session is being done, and that's finished, right? But more often than not, it's actually the beginning of learning and not the end. So, do you actually have a strong learning and enablement team? It means, do you have a large team which not just designs learning, not just delivers learning, but helps individuals to bring that learning into their workplace? And what that essentially means is that, let's say you have done a sales training program for retail staff, for example, on the ground, right? And then they have to actually go and practice that, right? So let's say there is a sales pitch. Let's say you have taught them about features, attributes, and benefits, but eventually now they're coming in and practicing that at work. So do you have material for them to kind of work with? Let's say you're working in the insurance space, for example, and you have your advisors who actually would go in and speak with customers. Customers have queries, right? So do you then have material for your advisor actually to be able to work with and explore and work through that conversation? So is there not just learning as an event, but are you following that up with a whole lot of enablement for them to kind of bring it down onto the ground? Another parallel example from an HR standpoint that comes to me is that you probably train somebody to deliver a training program, right? But after that, are you supporting them with back-end information? Are you helping them with how do they capture feedback? Are you helping them with, let's say, some additional content that goes in? So it's important to focus on that as well. And then in terms of technology, I mean, do you actually have the technology to scale? All of my conversations with the business heads here at Quest are to be able to look at, we're not talking about 1, 2, 3 people, we're talking about hundreds and thousands of people that we need to reach, right? And so if we do not use technology, chances are you have a good solution, but it's not landing onto the people who need it. Yeah, it's probably limited to the offices that you have a corporate, ivory tower as it's called, but it probably does not go down to the feet on street person who's in there. So how does technology help you do that? But another quick thought that comes to my mind as we talk of technology is a myth that now I have got technology, now learning will start to happen, right? A platform or a technology is only going to support you what can be done on the ground. Tomorrow, if your manager and supervisor is going to say, no, 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 don't learn, get onto the job, no platform and no technology can help you. So technology can only help you expedite something that is happening down on the ground, right? And that's very important for us to look at. And as we went through everything that we discussed, I want you to look at one common thread as we go along. That change has been the only constant across the globe. Change has been the only constant in terms of industries, and of course, learning as well has undergone a whole lot of transformation over the years. Now, if you ought to be a top employer, a top company in 2023, what you need to look at is the experience that employees are going through, right? Everything we spoke of from beginning until now was to say, is it easy for somebody to learn? Is it accessible? Is the content accessible for somebody to learn? Can they do this anytime, anywhere, any device, right? It is to look at how is learning from the employee standpoint. I want to also highlight one important point that I have experienced over the years. You may have heard of the Great Resignation, right? You're talking about people resigning from their job, and this is across white collar, of course, probably a whole extent across your blue collar and gray collar as well. And my experience tells me that while there are multiple other ways of engaging people, whether it is about having benefits, whether it's about how managers deal with their team members, etc. But one strong element that helps people hold back or being engaged, essentially is also whether are they learning and they growing, right? So what I want to kind of place on the table for all of you to think about and work with is that whether the trend is up, whether the trend is down, businesses perhaps as per targets or not. I think one of the things that should never be a how shall I say something that should get impacted or hurt is learning, because it is your people through whom you get to your customer, and your customer experiences what you offer through the foot soldier or feet on street person there, right? So ensure you keep that at the back of your mind. 2023 will have its ups and downs, will have its challenges, will have probably things push you back towards the wall. But it is for you to look at how will you still go on. 2 years ago, when overnight everybody had to go, let's say, hybrid or work from home, we managed, obviously, pretty much everybody on this call would have experienced this, but we managed that quite well. And 23, we don't know, what's in store. So are we ready, perhaps, for whatever, the environment, the world has to, throw at us? I think that's a question that we need to ask ourselves, right? So what I want to do as we get to this point, I'm just going to take a quick minute to pull out the screen and have that actually come up. And I'm just going to quickly put that up on the screen once again. What I want you to do is I want to hear from you. If you're able to see this and you're able to scan, there is a question that will appear, and I want to hear your thoughts on. And of course, after that, I'd like to take some of your questions. So I'll give it a couple of minutes for you to look at what's on the screen here and the question that comes in, and as a result of which what your responses are. Take a couple of minutes on that, and then I'd like to take questions that have come in. I'm going to pull this out now, and responses are coming in, so I want to actually look at all of this coming in. Let me know the moment you're able to see my screen. Absolutely wonderful thought there, that there are new work rules, and so whether it's hybrid, whether it's working remotely, whether it's being completely on the ground, rules are changing the way we work, so how we learn needs to change as well. Absolutely hire good talent. It's very important, for one to understand what talent essentially would mean. It would mean an individual who has skills. It means an individual who has a certain mindset. And so, yeah, to ensure that we have, a whole lot of the right kind of people that we would, work. For sure, can Billion Careers help in adopting learning? Oh, for sure. Think, happy to connect with any of you who may have, thoughts or questions to be able to ensure how we could work on this. Absolutely grow the business. I was talking to some of our business heads earlier, and the view essentially was to say that, of course, the external environment is changing, but unless we change along with that, I think business growth may be a bit of a question. So how do we do that? How do we look at? Yeah, of course, there is a recession coming in. So is learning going to be probably one of the first casualty for that? We need to ensure how we're actually able to work through this a lot more effectively. Ensure, in fact, that it's the right time to learn, to skill. You may probably have some downtime for people, so that's the time that you can actually get them into learning. focus on the individuals, absolutely. While you may look at groups, while you may look at probably set of people, but you also need to look at individuals that are coming in there, people having different challenges, people having different aspirations. Are you actually able to look at that? Yeah, so some very, very interesting things coming in there. That use of more technology. I would say that it's important for us to be able to look at what's on the ground, and technology only helps us, bring this to life. Unlearn and learn skills. By the way, growth mindset does not necessarily mean only learning new things. It's about saying, and I was having this conversation with an insurance leader a year and a half ago, and she was basically talking about how before the pandemic, about 15% of the business would come in through digital, and after the pandemic, about 85%. So you're actually looking at a complete shift, right? And so to be able to do that, are we unlearning something and then learning as well? So very, very important to look at. I think there are some very, very interesting things that are coming in. How is the environment changing? Is the workplace pet friendly? Is the workplace kid friendly? Are the labor laws getting updated? I mean, there are a whole lot of things that come in as far as the modern workplace is concerned. One thing is very clear, though, that probably the marketplace in the past, from a work standpoint, was more employer driven, but the marketplace of tomorrow is more employee driven. So are you looking at what the employee wants? Are you looking at what makes life easy and simple for them? Thank you for sharing your thoughts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to look at some of the questions that are in here, and try to pick and respond to some of them. I see the first one. Given the commodification of learning available across multiple products, even YouTube, for example, launching learning. How do corporate teams evolve to help address learning gaps? Should we embrace a multi-platform approach? I think what my experience basically tells me is that over the years there was earlier a focus on creating learning, so from scratch. But over the years, there's been a whole lot of effort on curating learning. So there is a whole lot of material available, whether it is documents, whether it is videos, whether it is interactive pieces. How is the learning team actually able to work through this by making this available? There could be TED Talks, there could be YouTube videos. So in my mind, actually leveraging on all the information that one is have, I think it's extremely important for us to be able to use some of these. So using multiple platforms, using multiple source of learning is extremely important. Thanks for that question. Yeah, and it's actually a question that Pradeep posed. It is actually very important to run a high quality induction program, but why do companies compromise on this aspect? A very interesting question there, Pradeep. I'll probably respond to this based on some of the experience I've had over the years. In a whole lot of organizations, you see people at different levels, and learning for them at different levels. And there is a focus on induction differently at different levels. And you probably see a high amount of turnover at probably levels that are far low, unless it's really, really the companies focusing on making sure that they're engaged. And sometimes you may have heard of this adage, right? That the COO is talking to the CFO and say, do we spend on learning and when their people are actually going to leave and go? But you say if probably you invest in learning, people actually won't go, right? So you're absolutely right, Pradeep. If at all we're able to invest in induction, which is essentially something that is extremely important, like a gatekeeper for people to come in. And only when we do that is it possible that people will feel engaged and maybe do their job well and are actually continuing with the organization for longer. So wonderful question. Thanks for that.
We have a couple of more questions in the chat box, Rohan.
Sure. I'll take a quick question here on the Q&A and then get to the chat box. As rightly said, that we have a lot of learning options now, which may bring a lot of confusion. What would be the best way to have focused learning being an HR professional? I think what's important, just continuing from what I shared earlier, you may have a whole lot of content available, but if you curate, sort of learning paths, So, pretty much every organization, whether you're dealing with your blue collar, gray collar, or even white collar perspective, would have a learning platform. So, how can you ensure there are learning paths that you create? How can you focus on certain things that individuals from certain areas can kind of pick? So, I think it's very, very important for all of you to look at that. So, can you then use this to be able to get some of the content that you curate to different people? So, just checking now questions from the chat box. Uh, Avatar is anywhere, anytime, and any device. It essentially means learning is not limited, let's say, to only in person, or not only limited to a particular device in an office network, but it's probably accessible to anybody, anywhere, anytime, any device, right? Um, how can tech help L&D for blue and gray collar workforce? Sindhu asks. I think it's important for us to understand that at the end of the day, an employee is doing what they're supposed to do, whether they are from a certain cohort, from a certain group. So what is important for us essentially to look at is the core, which is the content. The moment we have that content, we then need to look at which are the employees that we're actually offering this for, and hence as a result of which look at technology. Now, a few things that technology can help us do first is to create access, which means if you have very, very basic videos, etc., then people can have access to it from any device. So that's one thing that technology can help us. The second thing is that there is intelligence that comes about through technology. Call it AI, call it ML. It then tells you that here is a certain person from a certain geography on a certain job. Certain kind of learning should go to him or her automatically. So technology can help us kind of do that very effectively. To say that we have a whole lot of content, can the content be specifically directed? The other very important thing that technology can do essentially is it can bring about stickiness. So let's say you look at a store salesperson, right, and they undergo a certain set of virtual training programs, and then you need to see whether they're applying it. So let's say they kind of make an observation of this is what I did, this is what I spoke, this is how it worked. Some things didn't work. So technology can help us make learning sustainable as well, right? So one is access, second is ensure that you are targeting the right thing, and third essentially could be to ensure that it's sustainable. So technology can help us do a whole lot there. And yeah, I think there's a question that's coming next, which says how to make your training more effective for this industry. Now, I think what's very important for us to look at eventually, irrespective of industries, it is the human being who's consuming that learning is very important, right? So you will obviously look at curating, training or information based on the industry that you are in, but eventually you need to look at that person as a human being. So are they able to consume what you put together very well? Do they have barriers? Are they not being able to access it through a certain technology, or through a certain mode? You need to be able to think about that. Do you think that the environment does not allow them? So do you have, there are some companies that I know that have certain time blocked through a week, 30 minutes through a week blocked for time for people to learn. And especially in a store environment, for example, you can have different people do this, or let's say in a banking environment, you can have different people having different time that they spare for learning. But that can kind of make things very, very useful as well. I think the last thing that I want to add from a perspective of making it effective is actually if you are able to let the employee lead their learning. A lot of times we tend to push learning to them, right? So are you having conversations about what do they need to learn, what do they want to learn, and what are their problems? You will start to already have some of these, coming about in terms of solutions that you're actually able to run through them very, very well, right? Last question that I have, and I'm also mindful of the clock. Do we have refresher training sessions post attendee complete the learning sessions, 360-degree connect? I think it's definitely useful to do any kind of a refresher or application kind of a training to what people learn. But I think my advice would be to look at why are you doing that? So are you wanting to serve a purpose for people to remember? Are you doing that to serve a purpose of people to look at what are the problems of them applying it, so on and so forth. So if you have the why in mind, you should be able to work through this far better. I'm going to just take a quick pause because I've been running like a Shatabdi one direction.
Sure.
Neha,
Sure, Rohan. So thank you so much for such an interactive and informative session, Rohan. So first of all, thank you so much. So I would like to thank everyone. And right now we have a time crunch, so we will be kind of concluding this webinar. But we are like happy to take questions offline also. So everyone, please feel free to write us an email at our email ID, which is marketing@billioncareers.in, and we will be more than happy to revert back to you with any questions. And lastly, but not least, I would like to thank our wonderful audience. So being such curious and responsive, and we look forward to seeing you all in our next webinar. So yeah, once again, thank you so much to be here. So thank you so much, Rohan. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.